I wanted to reflect a little bit in the aftermath of my critique of Hamza Yusuf last week. I mean, people know that in the last two sessions, my first session, I had not listened to the entire conversation, but I heard enough to feel like, oh, that was a little bit of a disappointment. It was a lost opportunity because Jordan Peterson and Hamza Yusuf both have a huge audience, and clearly there are people that were interested and open, not necessarily supportive, but open to trying to understand more about what Islam was. And I was disappointed. And so in the last halakha intro, instead of just sitting as most of us do and complain, oh man, I didn't like that, he should have done this, he should have done that, whatever, I felt like, you know what, do something about it. Put your money where your mouth is. If you don't like it, then why don't you offer an alternative? And so that's what I did. And of course, I knew that by doing that, that would open the door to a lot of criticism, because certainly, I've gotten a lot of criticism because, I sit next to Sheikh, I don't wear a scarf, and all these kinds of things. So, I wanted to reflect on just this notion of speaking out, because, clearly we've learned here in the halakhas that part of our duty, part of our right, but our duty is to testify. And especially when we feel like something is not right, that, that is actually what our religion calls for. That's what God calls for. And I felt like it was important. I felt strongly that, okay, I think that he could have answered with better answers. And so what I wanted to do was then actually, contribute something to the discourse and help essentially provide an alternative bridge to Islam and the Quran that I felt was appropriate, because, when I speak to a non-Muslim audience or a non-specialist audience, I feel like you have to start building bridges by things that are intuitive and common ground that you can relate to just as a human being. And so it was important for me even to start with notions of love and trying to disabuse things that people normally associate with Islam. So, of course, I was expecting that it would be controversial, and I was right. We did get a lot of, people that came to watch the video on our YouTube channel. We cut, that section of it that I did, and I think we have close to 5,000 views, which is a lot more in a week's time than we are used to getting. And then, certainly there were a lot of people that commented. And, a lot of the comments were not particularly nice, but I was expecting that, and that's fine. That's part of the cost of speaking out, and it's not something, as I wrote about, that should dissuade people or make them, feel afraid, because, when I believe that when you are serving God and that you feel something in your heart, you feel like you can contribute, that you absolutely should. And so I thought I would just sort of reflect on that, because, nothing that I said in my conversation was at all negative, or I think even all that, special. It was really something that was trying to, again, open a bridge for people to understand about God and the Prophet Muhammad and, the Prophet's Muslims, love, everything that I felt people could respond to. But it was interesting, the types of the negative feedback that I got. So just, to give you sort of a range, of course, people were like, how dare you speak when you don't have a hijab? You can't, how can you speak intelligently about anything when you don't even know sort of the basic, commandment about, for women is you have to cover. Well, I've spoken obviously about hijab a lot in this space, so I would encourage people, if they're interested, to go back to that. And that how dare I speak because I'm not a scholar. And, separately, I think, one, I always say that up front, no matter what I say about Islam, I always say, this is my opinion. I'm not a scholar. But, part of what I was trying to do also is to demonstrate the power of this education, because, in counting the hours, we have all actually been here more than 500 hours, in these halakas in the last 2 years. And that's just for Project Illumine. I mean, I, have been a long-time student of, of the Sheikh. And so, my learning from him goes back decades. But if we just count the amount of hours that we here have spent in going chapter by chapter, 79 surahs, 500 plus hours, and that's a conservative estimate, that's a lot of learning. And a lot of what I said was intended to be sort of like the best, the essential, like what would I share with people who knew nothing about Islam. And so, that was important. Some people were like, "What is this stuff? You're talking about love. That's just that BS about Rumi. It's all Rumi. What is this?" Which I thought, oh my gosh, okay, if you don't think Islam is about love, then I think it's important for you to relook your assumptions and your education. We were accused of being a CIA channel, which was interesting, and I also got mansplained about how it would be really good if I would say peace be upon him after I reference Muhammad, or that I should, when I refer to Hamza Yusuf, that I should refer to him with a title. So I should refer to him Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, not just Hamza Yusuf. And I was told to go get an education because basically I know nothing and that I shouldn't be speaking. So, and people were like, I hate this channel, I don't like, Khalid Abul Fadl. So, it's like there was a lot of stuff, but there really was not a lot of engagement with necessarily the content and substance of what I was saying. And so it made me really think like, okay, I know social media is very toxic and people love to take that opportunity to just, start fights and things like that. But honestly, like as Muslims, we are commanded in the Quran to speak kindly. And, we are supposed to actually, be happy when people are wanting to learn about Islam. And it's our job to try and make that bridge, make that opening as welcoming and beautiful as possible. So when you have someone who is trying to do that, I really had to wonder, okay, what is the purpose of writing really mean, negative comments? And as a Muslim, it's like, okay, if you want to engage me on what I said, I'm very happy to have that discussion with you, and if you liked what Hamza Yusuf said and you were fine with that, well, fine, that's wonderful. But if you don't like what I said, why the negative comments? And a lot of them were just ad hominem attacks. They were just mean things that were said about me. So it's like, okay, so are you trying then to just, crush my spirit, or, shut me up, or, mansplain to me, or, whatever. And I think that that is just a really intriguing, important, and sort of sad statement of our priorities. Because fundamentally, the vast majority of people who are really unhappy were most unhappy that I dared criticize Hamza Yusuf, someone of his stature. They were more unhappy with the fact that I didn't like how he answered those questions, and I actually did something about it and offered an alternative instead of just complaining and saying, why doesn't someone else go do something? It's like, well, I decided to do something about it. And then I was upset that, like, okay, as Muslims, shouldn't we be happy when people try to offer alternatives? Because not everybody is going to understand Islam in one way or another. And if you can contribute to the conversation, then you absolutely should. And, YouTube is a public forum. If you didn't like what I said, then please, I encourage you, create your own video, add to the conversation, bring other people in a way that you think is appropriate. But when people get so bent out of shape because I dared criticize Hamza Yusuf, I think that that is a really important indicator of where our priorities are. And I think that that's something that deserves a lot of reflection. So, again, I wanted to hopefully, tell people that, whether you are actually speaking out in public or whether you are just, speaking to someone in private, a friend or whatever, I mean, this is obviously our duty as Muslims to testify to the truth and testify to the best of our ability. And that as we learn in these halakas, that if you are on the side of light, if you are on the side of truth, God knows your intentions. And I do believe that God will be with you, and that, that is something that, you never go wrong by doing something that you truly in your heart believe is right and that you're doing for the sake of Allah. So, it was interesting also when I, was told, like, oh, I told Sheikh about this, people were upset because I didn't say, peace be upon him after I said Muhammad. Sheikh was like, well, that's between you and your God. And then the point about the not referring to Hamza Yusuf as Sheikh. Well, my reaction to that is, listen, when Hamza Yusuf is ready to start calling out and speaking in public about all of the evil and the abuses that the UAE is committing against Muslims, and he actually starts, standing up for injustice where he should be standing up, at that point I'll think about referring to him as a sheikh. So I think that's the only appropriate answer to that. And lastly, so I want to say again, these are just, indicators, but I got a lot of really, really beautiful, kind, supportive comments. And for that, I'm really, really grateful because, a lot of times when you're speaking out into the wilderness, you don't necessarily know how people are receiving it. And so for everyone who wrote, really loving, beautiful responses, thank you so much because they meant so much to me. And then, I always feel like God has a way of sending certain messages at certain times, sort of dropping them as gifts. And so right before preparing for this introduction, there was a really beautiful comment that was posted on YouTube, and I thought I would share it. So in response to the excerpt, my presentation last week. So, Salam, I have been a Muslim for the past 10 years, and in my search for knowledge, I have encountered lots of mainstream Muslim speakers, and I genuinely believe each of them are right in their own place. But if I had to judge between them as to who has summed up Islam for me in its most best and pristine form, I would say it's Grace Song. It's my bad that I had judged her and compared her to the professor, but the fact that she emanates so much beauty and knowledge shows the effect of embodying Islam on each individual is different and unique and beautiful. Your summary of Islam actually moved me to tears, most probably because in my search for truth, I have struggled to harmonize Islam with my inner self, which always said, irrespective of what I read or hear about Islam, it is God's religion. If it is God's religion, it must be beautiful, as God is beautiful, and you just proved my inner belief to be true. Thank you for being part of my journey. Thank you so much for that beautiful message. It's on YouTube. And all I really have to say about that is, honestly, it's not me, it's this education. And I really have the Sheikh to thank because everything that we are getting exposed to and the beauty and, the depth and the sophistication of this message is truly life transforming. And I wouldn't have been able to say any of the things that I said without this Project Illumine journey, nor with the journey that I've shared with him over the last decades, because through the education and the living example and just seeing, Islam and how it plays out and how it's normal and beautiful and intuitive, that has been life-changing for me. So I'm super grateful that I was even able to do that. And I invite people, if you're just getting to know us, just coming upon us, to really engage with this learning because it is truly life transforming. And with all the darkness in this world, we get messages from people all the time, people who feel lost, people who feel, they had a bad experience, they don't understand, and they're just seeing that there's something beautiful here. We have to go back to the fundamentals. We have to go back to what the Quran says. We have to understand what it means. That is how we find our way back. It's clear after 79 surahs and 500 plus hours that this is the way back for us as Muslims. And so I truly believe that with all my heart. And so I hope that people will continue on this journey and stay with us. So thank you everyone again for your time and for your support. And inshallah, I'm looking forward to an amazing session. Surah Al-Nur. Yes, it's going to be great, inshallah. So, okay, thank you so much.